Greetings and welcome to the Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. I'm Phyllis Hollis, your host. As an extension of my Instagram page, Cerebral Women, this podcast offers insights into the visual art world. I interview artists, mainly artists of color and female artists, who will freely articulate what inspires their creativity. In addition, you'll hear interesting perspectives from dedicated art professionals who work with artists and the art institutions that feature them. I'm confident that collectively, these individuals will indeed stimulate your mind as they do our eyes. Please know, these interviews are conducted in my Manhattan apartment, so please forgive the background sounds of city life. Welcome to the Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. In this episode, I feature Kimberli Gant. She received her PhD in art history from the University of Texas, Austin, and holds both a MA and BA in art history from Columbia University. She is the curator of modern and contemporary art at the Brooklyn Museum. Kimberli was previously the McKinnon Curator of Modern and Contemporary Art at the Chrysler Museum in Virginia, and she has also worked as a Mellon Doctoral Fellow at the Newark Museum and Director of Exhibitions at the Museum of Contemporary African Diasporan Art. Kimberli has curated numerous exhibitions and gallery installations, including Black Orpheus, Jacob Lawrence and the Mbari Club in 2022, Journeys Across the Border, U.S. and Mexico, 2021-22, Brendan Fernandes, Bodily Forms in 2020, to name a few. She has published scholarly work in academic books and exhibition catalogs for the Newark Museum, the Contemporary Austin, the Student Museum of Harlem, MoCADA, Paris Photo, and the Center for Contemporary Art, Lagos. Enjoy this episode featuring art historian and curator Kimberli Gant. Kimberli, welcome to my podcast. I'm delighted to feature you so you can share us insights into your career and also the museum world. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be here and thrilled to be talking to you today.
When did you first discover your interest in the visual arts?
So I consciously recognized it when I was in undergraduate, when I was a freshman, because I was taken to art shows, museum shows, craft shows, galleries by my parents as a kid, my sister and I both, and I hated every minute of it. But as I got older, I think that all of that art, not only being around it, my parents are collectors, so I grew up seeing images of Black people, of Black life, of abstraction, of figuration. I had artistic people in my family, though I didn't really know it growing up. I found this out later when I was an adult. So it was all around me, but I didn't have an actual interest, I think, in it, though, I did the things that kids did. I did pottery classes and, fiction writing and things like that. But I remember my freshman year roommate said she was going to travel to Argentina for her study abroad, and she was going to be an art history major. And I kind of heard about art history. I knew it was a thing. I knew it was an area of study, but I didn't really know what that meant. But I did really love history. That was a subject that I always found just very interesting. When I took a course, I think it was my sophomore year, maybe, it was a medieval Mediterranean history class. And we utilized a lot of art in the class. And I think it was during that class that things started to click, that I said, oh, well, I like history. I like understanding how we got to where we are. I like understanding the world around us. And I'm starting to understand that art is a reflection of that, is influenced by that. We are motivated to create because of the environments and the society in which we live in. So then I kind of decided to take an art history class, and I was hooked. I thought I was going to double major in English and chemistry and write the world's first interesting chemistry book. I started to take a chemistry class, and it was like a 6-hour lab. And I said, this is not fun. We're not doing this, even though I loved it in high school. So I started taking the classes, and much to my parents' shock, and I think slight horror, I remember I told my dad I was going to be an art history major, and he looked at me and said, what? What are you talking about? What does this mean? What is an art historian? What are you going to do with this? Can you get a job? He was like, you hated art growing up. I was like, no, I didn't hate it. I just didn't want to go when, I was 10, 8, whatever. Now I'm like, it's really cool. And I think like a lot of parents, I think especially parents of color, my dad said, well, we didn't take you to those places and introduce you to artists and moments like this to be an artist. Like you can't draw, which is very true. I can barely draw a stick figure. And he said, we didn't take you to those places to be an artist or to work in the arts. You do it so that you're a well-rounded individual, that you could have art in your home, that you could be a connoisseur or appreciator of art, that you were, a full human being, but you don't work in the field, which I thought was really funny. But I said, well, let me try. Can I still just try? And that, just as a sidebar, has been a phrase that as I've gotten older, I've realized has become a little bit of a mantra for me throughout my career and my life, and the fact that I have very supportive parents. So to kind of get my dad off my back, I did minor in economics. So I was able to have some sort of slight business acumen that was able to offset the very liberal art degree that I got. But I was able to get jobs in it. I've worked in other fields. I've worked in marketing and advertising until I was able to actually find a job fully in the arts. But yeah, and so since then, since I started working in the arts, I continued doing it, even if I had to find creative ways to make that career happen.
Do you recall what inspired you to choose that first course? I mean, of all the courses in the curriculum, why did you choose that one?
I know. I think part of it was I thought the name was really cool. I just was intrigued. I was like, medieval Mediterranean history. Like, what is that? How was that a moment in time? So it goes to show you sometimes unexpected, serendipity works out in your favor. But it was, I think, you're looking through the course catalog and you're trying to find electives, and that class looked interesting. I think it really goes to also show how the way in which we're taught, I think, and oftentimes, the public school system, it can be so standardized and traditional that you want to understand a bit more. You want to be exposed to moments in the past that you didn't even know existed or could be framed in that way. So yeah, so I think that was I just remember just going, what does that even mean? And decided, well, take the class. If I don't like the first couple classes, I'll drop it and find something else.
Was there a professor that really impacted you?
So it's really funny. So the professor, I remember his name was Professor Wolf. I don't remember his first name, but we jokingly called him Professor Jesus, because he was this incredibly tall, kind of lanky guy, longish brown hair with a ponytail, mustache, goatee situation, bright blue eyes. He had this very soft-spoken voice when he talked. And you just look at him and you just go, am I taking a class with Jesus? What? Not seriously, but he was that kind of that image that you were brought up with, that kind of stereotypical images from like the 60s and the 50s of that benevolent, white male figure. And so it just was really funny, but he was a great professor, and I think reminded me of how history, culture, society, and objects, whether it's related to religion or not, can all work together in these very complex and nuanced ways. And it just stayed with me. It just made me want to continue. It sparked that curiosity of, well, what else and what else and what else? And I don't remember exactly how it made me think of, we're doing art history. Maybe it was also because of my former roommate. And that's when I decided I took a general class, and I said, oh, and I think a lot of things also resonated with me because of my upbringing and seeing things that I recognized. I was like, oh, I've gotten to travel with my parents. Like, I've seen that painting. Wow. Now I can think about how lucky and privileged I was to have parents who exposed me to so much arts and culture from a very young age, especially as, a young Black girl. And, I had my first passport when I was 13. So many people don't get that.
And what do you enjoy most about being an art historian in a curatorial role?
I think I love the fact that I can have a lot of right and left brain conversations. What I mean by that is I like to think I'm a creative person, maybe not in the art of making, but in the art of thinking and thinking about and recognizing art that is impactful, that is not only just visually stimulating, but also has a commentary that is very powerful. So that's the creative side. And I think that's the art historian side, like that curiosity of just, what does this mean? How did the person make it? How does it work together? What is it saying? How are they saying it? And then on the other side of my brain, I don't know if I forget if left or right is the creative and the practical, but on the practical side of my brain, then thinking about the business of art. And so I think people don't realize that a lot of your role as a curator, in addition to trying to kind of really conceptualize and present these very nuanced ideas through objects and trying to understand the artist in the moment in time, et cetera, you're also just thinking about the practicalities of putting a show together, of doing the labels, of how are you going to install it, of funding it, of programming. I mean, though curators become the very front-facing side of museums, no exhibition is made without many other people from many other perspectives throughout your institution coming together to work for months, if not years, putting a project together. And you really have to have a good team. So I think that's what really excites me about it. Again, I work with living artists, not all. I get to talk to artists. I get to hear. I just get to kind of be inspired and have all these little quick, or not even quick moments, but continuous and unexpected moments of just awe. And again, curiosity. I think you can very easily start to realize when you're getting into the same routine with your job. And so as a curator, I get the great luxury and privilege of being able to meet new people and get re-inspired, get re-excited about what I do or just what the possibilities are.
What advice would you give young people contemplating a career as a curator?
That fun question. I think there's a few things. So I think we're in a great moment where to be a curator, you do not have to go the traditional path that I took. So I have a BA, a terminal master's, and a PhD. All three degrees are in art history. And people definitely still do that. And that is very much a more traditional path, as I said, to go through. But now that there's a lot of other opportunities, I think, in kind of programs within university where you can maybe have been trained as a studio person, maybe you were a maker first and then decided you wanted to switch into art history. I know several curators who have done that and I think continue to do that. I think there's also programs, there's museum studies, there's curatorial programs. There's arts administration. Some of the other programs I get a little concerned with. I worry that they can either become a little too general, a little too specialized. But I think a big aspect of it is exposure. I think people don't really know that the museum world, the different departments and opportunities in museums exist. I also think that being very self-motivated in the sense of it always helps to have, I think, like with anything, a good mentor, an advocate, a supporter. I got a job in a small museum here in New York, my first kind of museum job at the Museum of Contemporary African Diasporan Arts, which was founded by Lori Cumbo, who is now the Commissioner of Arts in New York City. So I'm super, super proud of her and all that she's accomplished. And I think she was a big advocate and supporter of me throughout my career. And I've also worked with a lot of other curators who I respected. And I went and saw a lot of art and I would try and find out who those curators were. And as a 20-something just out of undergrad, I was cold emailing them, just saying, hello, I'm introducing myself. I went to school. I have an art history degree. I'm interested in working in museums. And this is even before I actually got the job at MoCADA. I was working in a marketing company at the time, but I didn't enjoy it and I wanted to get back into art. And I just started asking them if I could meet for coffee and talk about opportunities at their institutions or what they were thinking about when they were curating shows. So it really felt like I was still researching again, but I was researching for a professional opportunity. I'd also, by that time, had worked in, the corporate world. So I also was exposed to how bigger companies administratively organized, and I really wanted to continue that. Again, that left and right brain. So, when I finally had a meeting with someone, when I had a meeting with Lori, and it took 6 months of emails to get it together, I made sure that I had, my resume and cover letter there ready to go. So I didn't want to waste her time. Even if nothing came of it, I wanted her to see me as a professional and that I was going to bring something. I was going to be additive to her knowing me and to having this coffee with me. So I think some of the things to do is to also look at opportunities that not everyone are examining. I also really loved that I worked at a small museum. I've tended to, in my career before joining the Brooklyn Museum at the beginning of this year, I'd always really worked at small, mid-sized museums and got incredible training there because the smaller institutions often really need a lot of assistance. And so you can oftentimes get to work on more extensive projects or really put your hand on something from, initiation to completion that you may not get to in a bigger institution where they have a very maybe more standardized internship program.
Can we talk about those opportunities within museums and the larger museums?
Definitely. So I'm a curator, but I think people really forget that a museum is a corporation. It has a different tax status, but there's so many opportunities within one. So some of the different departments that are at the Brooklyn Museum, for example, we've got the curatorial department. There's education, which includes public programs, K through 12 programming, independent contractors. There's visitor services, which is, the front facing with the public, making sure people are getting questions answered and can go into the museums. Obviously, there's security and facilities, maintaining the institution as a whole and safeguarding it. Conservation. There are conservators who are really bring together art and science to conserve and preserve and really protect these objects for the benefit of the public for their viewing pleasure into perpetuity. We have lawyers who have to work finance. We have digital engagement, graphic design, exhibition design, publications, editorial. I mean, that's all I can think of off the top of my head. And I'm sure, hopefully I'm not, communications, marketing. I mean, there's so many different opportunities. So your experiences can really translate. Even if you don't necessarily have a background in art, you have a background in experiences that can be applicable into a museum setting as they could into, a corporate setting or not. And so part of it is exposing yourself, I think, and museums, I think, also doing a better job of just talking about all the different areas of a museum that a person could potentially work in.
And what type of relationship do you like to have with the artists?
You want to have a relationship that is going to last. Again, an exhibition from initial conception to when it's up to the viewer can take years. So you need to have a relationship that's going to last waves. Not everything is going to go perfectly. There's going to be, challenges and things that you're going to have to deal with. But ultimately, you want to have a relationship that's going to be good and that you all feel is beneficial at the end of the day, that you're happy with. And ideally, obviously, I'd love to be friends with the artist. Artists that I have worked with for years, we're still in contact. I'd work with them again. It just really depends on what you're doing together. But you want it to be one that will be beyond that project, ideally.
What do you feel is the purpose of art, and what is the artist's role?
I'll start with the first part of that question. I think the role of art is to get us to see the world from another point of view. That probably sounds cliche, but I think we all engage with our environment in different ways. I have a hard time remembering people's names, but I remember their faces. Whether that's a reflection of the fact that I'm looking at people, I focus on so much of seeing things. But I think that art can just give you a different way of understanding the world around you. And again, it's usually through a person or person's perspective, but at least it gives you an alternate. You're not just completely subsumed in one frame of reference or one way of thinking. Whether or not you agree with it is a different story altogether. I don't think you have to agree with what someone is putting out there, but you at least have to, respect that they did it, that they spent the time and energy to put forth something that can be very vulnerable, whether it's visual, whether it's writing, whether it's dance, all of those are art forms. And it is very scary, I think, to place yourself in front of others, to be judged, to be critiqued, and say, this is what I see and what I want to offer. So take this and do with it what you will. And we need to really respect how both, again, awe-inspiring but terrifying that can be for anyone. And again, just, you don't have to agree with it, but respect the maker, respect the person that did it and the people that participated in it and who put it out there. What was the second part of the question again?
What do you feel is the role of the artist?
I think the same thing. It's putting a point of view, a perspective out in the world. And I think it's also reminding us all, creating is not a luxury. It is a critical part of life. In whatever way you are creative, in whatever way you understand and see, it is valid, and it is important, and it is incredibly worthwhile. So, when I see art programs being cut, I think it is just as important as any other educational subject, because it's an outlet. It's a way to move us forward as a species, as a society. And it's not any less important. It's just another tool in the arsenal of thinking and experimenting and trying. So yeah, I think the role of the artist is to remind us that creativity is important, and is not just important, it is critical, it is necessary. And I think the pandemic, hopefully, though I do not wish it, on anyone or anything, I think that reminded us a bit, because we didn't have those outlets that we took for granted. And we need to we need to kind of continue to support those, actors, singers, dancers, visual artists, writers. We need all of that. It helps sustain us and move us forward.
Can you comment on the role of the museum trustee and how they can help bring about change?
So I think the role of the museum trustee is a complicated one. I think that museum trustees should support the missions and goals of the museum that they are a trustee of. But I also think that doesn't mean that they should just accept everything. They do need to question. They need to kind of know what's going on. And because of the fact that it has become obviously very aware that we already knew, but it's being more highlighted in popular culture, that, museums are not neutral entities. Their collections aren't neutral. How they've developed are not neutral. And I take that phrase from Latanya Autry and Mike Murawski, who kind of really spearheaded and founded that phrase and the movement behind it. But I think that museum trustees are really senior leadership roles. And so they can affect a lot of change in the sense of having the listening ear of senior management and knowing what's going on, knowing what some of the issues are that are happening in the museum, and really advocating, on behalf of those who may feel that they are not in a position to be able to really advocate for themselves. So I think, as you do in listening to those of us who are on your podcast, I think trustees can listen and observe and question and support. And that doesn't mean that, these things aren't both be complementary, and they can be sometimes a bit in conflict, but they ultimately hopefully help a museum to move forward, adapt, change, and be supportive of the people that work there and the audiences that come. So I think that's really the role of the museum trustee: support, observe, question, listen.
What are you excited about right now?
Well, I'll say a couple things. I'll say first that what excites me is the fact that I feel that there is change. Like the conversations are happening, and they're happening throughout the entire institution, from senior management to everyone. And so that's great, because while I always believe in support when there's like a DEA staff person, I always get very nervous that there becomes this one person who's expected to enact all of this quote unquote change. And that's impossible for any one person. You have to have buy-in and support throughout the entire institution, all levels, to really actually make change happen institutionally and holistically. So I'm glad the conversations are being had. I'm glad that I'm seeing people of color come to museums and have an interest in what's happening at their museums. I think the Brooklyn Museum is a place that has been very involved with the local communities for obviously much longer than I've been there. But even when I didn't work there, and this was years ago when I first lived in New York, the Brooklyn Museum was always this super cool place. Like the community came out, you dressed up, you pre-partied, you were cultural, you were pre-partied, and you went to the club. Which I thought was really funny, but I thought it was really great. And I think obviously we bring in great artists and do great shows. And I'm loving seeing more artists of color having big projects, having the recognition that they should have had decades ago. I mean, it's happening. At the same time, I do have some concerns. And my concerns stem from the fact that I feel the art world in general tends to work in cycles or in waves, and that we're on a crest of real strong interests in African American, African diaspora artists. Great. However, when is that wave crest going to crash? Is it going to crash? And is there going to be the new wave after that? So I feel like you've seen that with, Latinx art, Asian arts. There tends to be this repeating of ethnic groups, sadly, or, women, gender with women, and we get very popular. And so everyone's like, we got to have these shows, we got to have these exhibitions, these collections, And for a minute, there's, and I mean that, metaphorically, for a while, there's a lot of things happening. But then I think ultimately people want to move elsewhere. And so, things can always shift and change, but what you want is change where it's not a trend. You want it to be something that is going to continuously occur. And so that there will always be a consideration of, okay, who are the artists that we're exhibiting? Where are they from? What are they saying? What is the type of work they're doing? And so that you're really trying to at least give a nod to the world of art, not just a skewed perspective. And every institution is going to be skewed in some way, but at least let's try and be a bit more comprehensive in our skewing, which sounds contradictory. So I just want to make sure that the change lasts and doesn't just become a footnote in the history of art where we're like, oh, there was this moment where this was really popular. This was really happening. But I feel like right now we're still in a good place. And I think what I hope is that with my colleagues, both in my current institution and those in my colleagues just in the field, we see what's going on. And we are always, I think, trying to keep this momentum moving forward, like not letting it die down. So that's my hope that that continues.
So this is our final question. How do you want to impact the art world?
I want to create impactful shows of impactful artists in that people are starting to, I want the names of the artists of the shows that I do to be able to be thought of off top of mind as the artists that tend to be remembered because their names get repeated and repeated and repeated with shows and books and things like that. I want to add to what my predecessors in the field have been doing in terms of expanding our knowledge of the history of art, expanding through telling the stories that have been ignored or forgotten or just now are being known. And I want to kind of also, I want to make the art world a place that is not only seen again as a luxury, that I want art to be seen as necessary and critical, as mathematics, as reading, because it all feeds into each other. You know, as I said, I think I credit my parents again that I have a very left and right brain thinking. So I think all of us do in many ways, but they think they need to be one or the other. And I don't think that's the case. We're all really complex individuals. You know, if you want to go into accounting, but you also have a passion for creative writing, why can't you do both? You know, why can't you see the value in both? Even if one maybe is more what you're making your traditional kind of money with, and another is because you also you enjoy it and it's an outlet for you. So I just want us to try. I want that mantra to be for everyone. Just try. You know, it's okay if it doesn't work out, as long as you have planned it. Maybe you plan it out so that you've got not necessarily backup, or you've got a support system, or you've got a safety net for yourself. But I've been very privileged and honored to be able to go, well, I'm just going to try it and know that if it doesn't work out, at least I said I did it, and I can go do something else, or I can try something else. So I don't want that to come off as being very flippant, because I know we live in a very stratified world where that's much easier said than done. But maybe you can try things in smaller ways. Like, it doesn't have to be like your job, but you're just trying something personally to see if you enjoy it. And I think that that's just important really to do.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your time and your perspective. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. For additional content, please visit cerebralwomen.com and be sure to follow Cerebral Women on Instagram.